to another episode of Stuck in My Mind podcast. I am your host, Wize, and my guest today is a serial entrepreneur and business coach who's been helping founders build scalable, profitable businesses since 1998. He specializes in helping entrepreneurs make the shift from solopreneur to true business owner, so their business creates freedom, not burnout. He's been featured on NPR Morning Edition, Fox News, and major outlets worldwide. And today we're breaking down how to build a business that actually works for life. Welcome to the show, Jeremy Shapiro.
Hey, thank you so much for inviting me on. I'm excited to be here.
Oh man, the pleasure's all mine, man. I'm excited. So, what first pulled you into entrepreneurship, and what did you think business ownership would give you back then?
You know, when I first got started as an entrepreneur, it was still in my high school days. And every business I've had since then has always been in the service of fellow entrepreneurs. And I'm a serial entrepreneur myself and seen firsthand the pros that come with being a true business owner, not just self-employed, but being a true business owner. And that's something I've been helping clients do now for almost 30 years. And it's truly a joy to see that freedom that entrepreneurs get when they really own a business.
And when we talk about really own a business, we mean something where people aren't bogged down to basically when you have a business that's similar to a job.
Yeah, many people go out and start a company, and especially here in the US, you just hang a shingle and you're in business, right? You don't even need to file a corporate paperwork. Many times you can have a doing business as, and next thing you know, you're in business. And it's just so easy to get going that oftentimes new business owners find that they're often running a business and working longer hours, more difficult hours, and with all the worst parts of having a business while also taking on the worst parts of being an employee. And they're really, at that point, self-employed. And so the business isn't supporting them so much as they're supporting the business and propping it up every minute of the day. And that's a whole level of stress and challenge that really doesn't need to be the case when you have a business.
Absolutely. So early on, were you more of a builder or a grinder, and how did you shape your path?
It's funny when you say the word builder, as I look thematically back through my life to even early childhood, I've always been a builder. I've loved to create things. And I think career-wise, that's turned into creating businesses and helping others to do the same thing. But especially early on, my earlier businesses was helping others to build, right? Whether that was, doing software development and helping companies build software, right? Or helping business owners to build the right systems and processes and marketing and such in their business, but it's always been around building. So yeah, I strongly identify in those categories as a builder.
Great. When did you first notice entrepreneurs confusing being busy with building something real?
Yeah, when I have folks do what we call like a time diary, right, which is figuring out like where you spend your time, it's often really eye-opening. So for our listeners, something you can try doing is you can just jot down throughout your day what it is you're doing. Maybe set an alarm on your phone that goes off every 5-15 minutes. And when it does, just take your pen, jot down, here's what you're doing in that moment. And you'll quickly come to realize really where you're spending your time. And it's amazing how much time we all spend on busy work. Right? We might try and justify it, or in fact, may not be helping the business at all, but we're busy, busy, busy. And there's not really a prize for being the busiest person. Yet we've sort of created this toxic busyness culture. You've probably heard these conversations when you check in with someone and ask how they are, and they say, oh man, I am so slammed, I'm so busy. And they list off all the things that are overwhelming their schedule, as if that's a badge of pride, how busy you are. Now, contrast that with being more intentional with your time. Especially if you do this time diary and you see where you invest your time, you can start to be more tactical and more intentional with how you spend your time throughout your day. If you think back to like what it's like just before you leave the office for a long weekend or a vacation, isn't it amazing how you prioritize and how productive you get in those last few hours? And what if every day you ran with that kind of efficiency and that kind of productivity? That can get you tremendous results while not having it be this overwhelming 120-hour work week.
Mm. So what was there a moment when you realized working harder wasn't the same as working smarter? Because we all know that phrase, work smarter, not harder.
Yeah. So in business, right, an example of this would be creating systems and having people in your company run those systems. So working hard would be you doing everything in the business as a solopreneur, which look, when you're just getting started and proving stuff out, yeah, it's okay to be doing all that, but you want to quickly be looking at what does need to be taking up your time, right? Like what are the $10 an hour tasks or $100 an hour tasks that are keeping you from working on your $1,000 and $10,000 an hour tasks? And when you start to realize sort of the value of the different kinds of work that you're doing, you can start to systematize what it is and then bring on the right people to run that system for you and for the business. And if you hire right, you can often hire people who are better at these things than you are and will own that role in the same way that you bring that pride of ownership to the company. That frees you up to reinvest your time in the company, outside the company, pursuing interests, giving back in your community, starting new companies. It gives you the optionality to choose how you spend your time because you're not just busy doing everything in the company. You're doing the highest value work that you can bring to the company.
But a lot of people, a lot of business owners kind of sort of, they find it a little bit difficult to give up some of that control.
Mm.
What,
Yeah,
what,
I find
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I find commonly there's a few mindset shifts that are needed for business owners to move from that solopreneur to a business owner. And you touched on one of them right there. This idea, this perfectionist mentality, the idea that no one can do something better than you can. And if you keep putting in more time, something will get better and better and better. And with certain things, that is true, but there's this whole concept of diminishing returns. So one exercise I'd love to do with business owners is to have them document down one of those repeatable things they do over and over in the business that they feel nobody else could do as well as they can. And once you systematize it, then you yourself can just follow your own system and you'll realize where it's a little off or where it needs modification. And a really key piece when you create any of these systems in your business is to figure out what your definition of success is. What is your short checklist you can use to determine is something good or is it not? Now, when you hire someone to do that, you can sit across from them and go over this system for the role you're hiring them for. It's such a difference compared to hiring someone just to take on whatever you can throw at them, which is a really stressful job for that person. They never know what's going on. When you hire them for a specific task and role that you've defined, it's a much smoother and better hiring process and onboarding. And when it comes to management, you and they now share a definition of what success looks like for a system. So if they're not meeting it, they're going to know that before you can even step in and try and course correct perfection. And this gives you repeatability, and that repeatability gives you that scalability.
Mm. So what did you personally have to unlearn before you could grow as a business owner?
Oh man, I think back to, some of those tough lessons we all learn in our business, on that journey, that entrepreneurial journey. And I remember back to one of my earlier businesses, as I was growing and bringing on team members and systemizing things. One of the roles I had as the business owner was I still did like new account sales and account management. That's pretty common as you scale up. You have people do the work of the business, but you still handle the incoming and management. And so then I was growing to the point where I started bringing on account managers to handle those relationships with our clients. That was good because it freed me up and it allowed us to scale more. What I didn't do well is we didn't communicate that really well. So instead, we just introduced a new face and we informed our clients that the rates were going up because we got to pay our new staff here. And it was just really poorly messaged. And looking back, it wasn't even shortly after we did that I realized just how poorly we handled the messaging and what we could have done differently as we expanded the team and changed out really where the relationship was with that client. So yeah, unlearning sort of the communication styles that we were using and taking on better practices for client communications was really important.
Excuse me. So you talk about a lot about the shift from solopreneur to business owner. Why is that distinction so critical?
Well, when you're a solopreneur, everything blocks on you. That means you can't get away from the business. And if you're not there presently in the business typically can't run and surely for the most part can't grow, right? So there was a client I was working with and he started his company and had physical hardware in retail stores. And this was wonderful because his clients bought the hardware and then also had ongoing fees with him. It was a good business model. The downside to this is being a solopreneur, it meant he always had to be there to support those clients. Now, if a customer has an issue with your hardware in their retail store, that's costing them money. That's not good. So it was really important to him as the business owner to be available and accessible to his clients and customers. And I value and support and agree with that. Now, does it need to be him? Well, not necessarily. This was also a guy who loved the outdoors. He loved mountain biking. It was not only great for his physical health, it was great for his mental health. He got the great outdoors, fresh air, space in the business. It was wonderful. Except now that he had this business, when he went out in the mountains, there wasn't really great cell phone coverage. And he didn't feel that he was as available as he wanted to be to his customers. So he wasn't getting out there. And you can imagine how challenging that is as a business owner, not to be able to pursue your hobbies, take care of your physical health, your mental health, and so forth. So one of the first things we did is we brought on an outsourced customer service rep. This was somebody overseas who was able to work 40 hours a week, normal US business hours in the market he was in, and they could handle answering the phones, emails, live chats, all that sort of frontline support. So he could still take great care of his customers and he could still step away from the business. Now, what do you do when you suddenly free up these 40 hours a week? Well, sure, he got back into nature and did that, which was really good. But he also was able to do those higher value tasks in the business. Now he was able to go out and do more sales calls. Now he was able to work on product development. Now he's able to work on the bigger vision, mission, and plan for the company. All this really important high-level work that is worth a lot more than what he was effectively paying himself by being on the front lines for customer service. And so as a result of that, everyone wins. The clients get faster, better response time, and they're taken care of. He gets the freedom and space from that business. And he's also now providing job opportunities, which is tremendous. So this is something any of our listeners can do as you're moving from being a solopreneur to a true business owner, is figure out where you're spending your time. That's not the greatest use of your time. Hire for some of those roles to free you up and start to grow. And then you can move towards being a true business owner.
What are the most common traps you see successful entrepreneurs fall into?
So one of the common traps we see entrepreneurs fall into is that perfectionist mentality we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Right? If you feel no one can do something as well as you can, then you're going to resist building a system and you're going to resist hiring anyone to help you out in the business. Right? So that's one of those big blocks. I occasionally hear a fear around systematizing and teaching other people the trade of the business because someone else might go out and launch a competing business. Now, does that happen? Very rarely. You've got to remember there are those of us who are business owners and we want to take on that risk and start a company and enjoy the fruits that come with that. Most folks, however, would prefer a steady, reliable paycheck, job benefits, and knowing what to expect every day when they show up to the office and being able to leave that behind at the end of the day, right? As an entrepreneur, we take on a ton of risk. So someone coming to work for you is typically because they want a job, not because they want a business. And so even if someone does go out and open up a competing shop across the street trying to do the same thing, if they're a first-time business owner, they have no idea what they're getting into, all those challenges you face and all those things that you're doing. And most importantly, all the innovation you continue to bring to the business as you grow and change up what those product offerings and everything else are that you have. You have a true differentiation for your business that they won't have. So that fear of someone else coming in and taking it all over is usually not something to worry about. And in the rare case someone does, it rarely works out.
So how do you help founders uncover hidden profit inside a business they think is already maxed out?
Yeah, oftentimes entrepreneurs hit plateaus, right? When we hear this, oft idealized hockey stick curve, up and to the right for growth, that's wonderful. But if you zoom out of any of those big curves, you'll see that at some point flattens and becomes the top of an S curve. These aren't curves to be avoided, right? They're predictable. We know in any growth curve in a business, you're going to have slow growth, it'll take off, and then it'll plateau again. So when you expect these, well, then you can look to stack up those growth curves so you can continue the growth. Because we all know that when we've had businesses that are growing and you've got new customers coming in every day and the revenues are up and things are expanding and all is well, it feels good, right? You're winning at business and that's a wonderful feeling. When it plateaus, when the things that got you there aren't getting you further, that feels really frustrating. It feels like you're banging your head against the wall. You're doing the same thing and it's just not moving the needle to grow the business. And this happens in almost all businesses. So when we expect that plateau, we can look at ways to break through. And what I've found over my years in working with businesses is there's sort of three different levers we can pull in a business that can increase those gross revenues and the profitability. And oftentimes it comes down to just looking at a few basic numbers in the business and then realizing which of these levers we want to start pulling on first that can get us back to growth. We have a whole playbook of strategies that you're able to put in place in your business that can bring in additional revenue, can increase the profitability, and set you back on that curve to growth, which we all know, love, and deserve as business owners.
Awesome. So, why do so many entrepreneurs build businesses that depend entirely on them? Like, how can they get out of that? How can they just I know we've been touching on all that, but a lot of entrepreneurs, that's what they do is build a business that relies heavily on them.
Yeah, it's common that most of us go out and start our first business not having ever had a business before and not knowing how to do it. So we trip, stumble, and fall, make some mistakes. And some of these new businesses see success. And that revenue provides growth, and business owners get in that mindset of, with growth, they can then hire, and with hire, they can grow, and you rinse and repeat, right? But if you're in that in-between space, that the business isn't a failure, but it's not rocketing and taking off, that's a challenging spot to be because it doesn't feel like revenue can support building out a team or reinvesting in the business. But if you're not doing some kind of marketing within the business and you're not doing some kind of work to grow your audience and grow your customer base and so forth, then it's going to be really hard to put any strategy in place. I'm a huge fan of small hinges that swing big doors.
Yeah.
Right. So if we can improve an existing process, there's magic there, right? If you have a flow of customers coming into your business, you have a flow of leads coming in, right? There are all these little tweaks we can make that will provide those big incremental gains that we're looking for. So I'm an avid cyclist, and the parallels between cycling and business I find so interesting. I won't nerd out too deep in that, but one of them that I love is the British cycling team. The British cycling team was one of the worst in the world for a very long time. They sort of had this terrible reputation. But a number of years back, they brought on a new head coach. And what this coach did was look for little changes, right? Already all the cyclists are already on, the best bikes and the top form, top athletes and so forth. But somehow all the other countries were beating the pants off of the British cycling team. So he looked at what are the little things we can do. And it came down to some really interesting things. Like, what if we have the players, wash their hands more often? What if we, paint the insides of the trucks white? There's an interesting note on that in a second. What if we, change up this diet, this seat position, this, and that? And he was looking for just these little 1% gains, these little what are called marginal gains. Because as you stack those up, it's like compound interest, right? The growth on top of growth on top of growth is huge. So it's not about looking, how do we triple our business over the next month, right? It's about what are these incremental gains we put in place and that we build on and build on and build on. And these are the things that we see when companies put into place lead to that big growth over growth over growth, right? And the little side note on the painting the inside of the truck white, they realize that when the inside of the trucks are painted white, you can more easily spot dirt and dust before it gets into the actual mechanics of the bicycle. So if you're able to spot that stuff early as a leading indicator, you keep things super clean and the machine's operating at, absolute peak performance.
Yeah, because you figure if there's dust on the white paint, there's dust on the chain of the bike and that's
all of it, right? This is a business we call these leading indicators. What is the thing you see now that is indicative of what's about to happen? So you can course correct early as opposed to too late. And by the way, these little marginal gains he put in place led them from one of the worst teams in the world to one of the top teams in the world. Just those little 1% incremental gains. Same kind of thing we do in business all the time.
Awesome. So how do you scale and cash flow a business without adding more hours to your week?
Yeah, this touches on the concept of that working smarter versus harder, right? If we look back, any of us, in our own businesses or our lives, we can remember all these pivotal moments, these big lessons learned, many of them learned the hard way, that forever improve what we do in life. And that's the same in business. But when you work with someone who's been there, done that, and they've seen the pitfalls, they can help guide you around those pitfalls, show you the different paths and how to get there easier and with less of those mistakes. Now, I'll share an example. This touches on the concept earlier we were talking about with diminishing returns, right? Along with bringing that wisdom. So in the earlier days of Google AdWords, I had a business and we were spending money on ads, right? We'd spend $1 and we get back $4 in revenue, which was great. If you could spend $1 and get $4 back, you do that all day long. And so we did. We were spending at the time, I think it was like $10,000 a month in ad spend. And so we scaled it up. We went to $20,000 a month, right? So we doubled the ad spend, and you'd think that would turn into, the 4X of that 20,000. It didn't. Instead of being a 4X, it was like a 3X. And so 3 to 1 is still pretty good. So we increased the ad spend again, and it went down to like 2 to 1. And at some point, we were somewhere around like, I think it was like $70,000, $80,000 a month in ad spend. And now we're breaking even. We'd spend $1 and get $1, which, depending on how well you know your business, that might be okay. That might be scary. For us, we were okay with that. But then we took our eye off the ball. We started looking at different things and working on different projects in the business. And then we found out we were spending $1 and getting like 50 cents back. And spending $1 and getting like 40 cents back. So now we're just throwing money away. And that's not good. So we sought out a company who understood how all this stuff worked, and they came on and started managing the AdWords for us, right? And within our first month working with them, it was great, by the way. They cut our ad spend and they like dramatically increased the efficiency of the ads. So it was like they cut our ad spend, I think, in half and doubled the conversion on our ads. So we saw like a times 2, so 4X improvement on what we're getting. So it was wonderful because now we had somebody else who had the expertise, who was keeping up with all the endless changes these platforms roll out, that allowed us to focus and get back to our business. So very often when we look at solving a problem in our business or finding that shortcut there, sometimes we educate ourselves so we can do a better job in the company. Other times we'll hire someone to come into the company as an employee or a team member and handle that job. Sometimes we'll outsource to an individual and have an outsourced individual take care of it, right? And other times we'll hire a company and task them with a certain deliverable. And any which way you cut it, if something has to get done in the business, leverage is often the best way to find that growth, leveraging the talents and experience and expertise of others.
Awesome. By the way, a good friend of mine, Dorian, who was actually a guest on the show, she left a comment. She said, this is some really good stuff. So someone is enjoying this. So that's good. That's good.
Awesome, Dorian.
If freedom equals optionality, what options should every business owner be working towards?
Yeah, when we look at the longer term trajectory for our business, any business only ends up in one of 3 places. One is you pass the business on to your kids. And you've got to ask honestly, do you really think your business will be an asset that you're passing on to your children? And then secondly, are they going to want that business in the first place? The answer to the first question is usually no. And if you think it's a yes, the answer to the second question is usually a no. So yes, businesses do pass on generationally. It's exceedingly rare. All right. The other direction is you end up closing up shop. At some point, you decide the business is done. You turn that open sign to closed, right? You send out a nice note to your customers, and that's that, right? Maybe the business owner passes away. Maybe you just decide to move on. Maybe it's just been run into the ground. Most businesses simply just don't make it, right? The majority of businesses fit this category. That leaves us with the third category, and that is that you sell the business. So given the choice for the directions that the business can go, passing it on to your kids, running it till the day you die or you drive the business into the ground, or selling it, which direction is the most exciting as a business owner, right? It's usually that last option. If we build a business with the mindset that we're going to sell this at some point, then you start thinking about what makes your business a saleable, cash flow producing asset. And when we look at our business as a valuable, tangible thing that would bring value to somebody else as well, it changes how we think about it. Now we think about the systems, we think about the people, we think about the brand, we think about the processes, we think about repeatability. And most importantly, from a financial standpoint, we think about what we're putting into the business compared to what we're getting out from that business. I had a client that I was working with who did not come around to systematizing and hiring the way that many of us would like. He was on the job site and talking to a customer, writing up a sales quote for a customer, and a truck comes rolling down the hill towards him with one of those bobcats, like the excavators in the back. And so this truck comes rolling towards him. He looks up in time to see the trailer about to hit him. And it does hit him and drags his body down the road. So when he comes to, he's in the ICU. He's got, broken leg, broken ribs, punctured organs. Like, he is in rough shape. And he had a decision to make. He can't be out there making sure the team starts the work on the job site that day, writing up sales estimates, managing projects, and doing all the things he was doing in the business if he was laid up in the hospital room. So he had to figure out, do I shut the business down or do I create the systems and hire? And so that decision was forced on him, whereas most of us get to choose to keep running things the way we are or choose to create the systems and hire. And so in his case, he brought on software solutions so his team could check in on site right from the mobile phone. And it was geotagged and all that stuff, so he knew when his team got there on the job site. He brought on someone to close sales and go out there and meet with prospective customers and manage that whole process. And next thing you know, he's, at the hospital. He's going to be there for quite a bit. And he has a team off and running. So now the hours he is putting into the business, not by choice, are drastically reduced. But wouldn't you know, he hired a salesperson who did a better job than he was doing. And this led to more sales and more profit. And so sure, he had expenses tied to the business of paying new staff people and software platforms and all that. But he was putting far less hours into the business. And so the ratio he was looking at was, how many hours do I put into my business? And what am I getting out as the benefit of being the owner of the company? And so that gave him like an effective hourly rate, which for many smaller business owners, if you look at your total outflow cash-wise from the business that goes into your personal bank account, compared to how many hours you're putting in, you might not like that math. Now, a lot of business owners that I work with and that I admire and that we see out in the world have a very different equation, and they're pretty quiet about it. Especially serial entrepreneurs or business owners juggling a few different companies. They often have, at a certain point, a CEO who's actually running the business. So now they've moved in more to that investor seat, and they might work an hour a week, check in with the team now and then, right? A little more as needed, but that gives them that freedom to step away from that business, that optionality to reinvest their time how they see fit, whether that's launching new businesses, giving back in their community, traveling, time with family, whatever else it might be. It gives you the choice of how you spend that time because you've built a cash flowing, valuable, and saleable asset.
So how should entrepreneurs think differently if they want to eventually sell their business? Because again, some people like one of my favorite rappers of all time, Jay-Z, right? He's developed a system where he builds businesses to sell them. That his thing was, he didn't get too attached to any brand, and he would sell it all. He had no problems selling off the asset because that's what he built it for. How can entrepreneurs kind of like just switch that mindset that way where, yes, I understand you built this brand, this is your baby, whatever it is, but how do they detach themselves and realize like, hey, this is just another vehicle, something I can just sell and maybe duplicate it and build something else?
Yeah. So when you launch your business or you shift your mindset after you've launched your business with this idea of creating a saleable asset, we start doing a few things differently, right? One is an exercise I love doing with clients is we create an org chart for your company of all the different roles and all the different responsibilities that your company has. And then you put a name in each box of who is doing that. Now, look, if you're a solopreneur, your name's in all those boxes, and that's fine, right? As you grow, you might have team members with their name in multiple boxes, and that's also okay. So the question we've got to look at is if somebody else was doing all those things in those different roles, everywhere that your name is, what would it cost to have those team members doing that? And how do you build the business to support that? Because if the answer is the business will never have cash flow to support people running those parts of the business, then what you have is a glorified job. And that is not a very sellable asset because the only buyers you're going to have for that are other owner operators. there's a statistic, the Subway chain, the sandwich chain Subway,
Mm-hmm.
that's a franchise operation, right? So that means you've got to buy your way into it. So you spend money, you effectively buy the business. And then most of them, I believe, are owner operated, meaning you paid money to get yourself a job. And a lot of these folks work 60 to 80-hour weeks, and they make it's whatever the number is, I believe it was just under $60,000 a year. So you think, what job would you want where you own the liability? You also have to be there 60 to 80 hours a week, and you're not making great money with that. It's like the worst of all worlds, right? The only person who's going to buy that is another owner operator who you're going to see behind that counter every single day. Now, look, if you want an owner operator business, that's great. If you can't tell, I'm a bit of an extrovert. I enjoy chatting with clients and people and being on the front lines, right? There's something nice about that idea of being on the front lines in your business, and that is okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you can't afford to pay someone else to do all the stuff that you do in the business, then that's not that saleable of an asset. So step one is figure out what those different boxes are for the roles in your business and put the names in there. Step two is make sure you have documentation for what these roles are so you can then start to hire for them. And then step three is start hiring yourself out of those boxes to the point that you're moving up that org chart to the most highest value tasks. And then at some point, ideally, mostly off your org chart. Now you've got a saleable business, not to an owner operator, but to someone who's looking for a cash flow producing asset as a business.
What's one belief about growth that's actually holding founders back?
It's funny when I talk to business owners about where their pricing is.
Yeah.
And especially if you're in a services-based business, if you've got widgets in a highly competitive space, congrats on running a business that's a scary business. If anybody else can just, open up shop and sell a competing widget from the same factory, that's a tough space to be in. So that space aside, assuming you have services or offering that truly are unique to your ideal customer, right? Business owners rarely revisit their pricing. So there's a business owner I was working with, and she had built on her own a solopreneurship business that was almost a side hustle that was a six-figure business. Mm. And she then heard from someone else all the way across the country who liked what she was doing and asked her if she'd be willing to teach them how to build that same business that she built so that they would basically get what we call a business in a box, right? Tap and leverage all that knowledge she has. Now, that was not her core business. She'd never thought of licensing this or teaching or training or selling this. And so the conversation we had was about how to price this. And her initial thought was she's got to fly out there. She'll be there for the day. So she's thinking maybe I'll charge $1,000. And then she's got to cover her flights and food and travel expenses and hotel and all this. And I'm looking at her and I ask him hold on, you're teaching someone everything you've learned to launch a six-figure business in less than a year. So they can go and just repeat that. And you're looking at it based on what you think your time is worth. Don't you think this knowledge is worth so much more?
Don't you think this system is worth more than just the time you're putting into it? Yeah. It's that.
Yeah. The system, the shortcuts, the best practices, her figuring 1,000 things that don't work to find the one thing that does work. And so, we are encouraging her to charge a lot more. And we got to the point where we're saying, well, why don't we just put a zero on the end of that? Not $1,000, but $10,000. And they're covering all your expenses, by the way, right? And you can spend the day with them and show them the ropes. And that's when I got the nickname Jeremy at a zero Shapiro, who was from taking a price point and putting zero. And she's like, oh my gosh, how do I do that? How can I possibly ask them that? Because she wasn't comfortable with the idea of what her own personal value was. Now, the value to the client, right, is huge. We know what that business, that value is, right? So it was getting over that mental shift of where that pricing should be to move more towards a value-based pricing versus a time-based pricing. So we look at what is the benefit we're delivering, not what is the dollars per hour that we're getting, right? So in that case, she went out there and pitched it, and the prospect said yes, which of course tells us it was worth far more than that, right? But at least that gave her that confidence to realize there's real value here and she can do much more with that. So I share that story to illustrate this idea of pricing. If you have no perceived competition, and there's a keyword there of perceived competition in the eyes of your customer, you have the ultimate in pricing elasticity. You can go and shift to values-based pricing because nobody's going to undercut you. because you are truly unique in the niche or the space that you're in and the offering that you have. So when you do that, you should be testing pricing. A lot of people think that the pricing is fixed and don't think about value-based pricing. But I will tell you what, if you test out different pricing options, you don't have to go change things for existing customers. Try this on lead generation or with prospects that are coming in and so forth, right? Simply test it out. And what's surprising, if we can nerd out in the math for a moment, is the difference this makes in the business. Let's say you have a continuity-based business, like you have a membership program, a subscription, or whatever it is. You charge $40 a month. Your cost of goods all in is $30 a month. $40 minus 30 gives us our profit, which is the $10 a month. All right. Let's say we go with a modest price increase, a 25% increase from $40 to $50 a month. Will that impact your conversions? Well, we should test it, right? But that means every one of those customers you bring on board is now 50 minus 30 is $20 in profit. So increasing your price in this example, that 25% in testing it, gets you a customer that has twice as much profit margin as your existing customers. So you could technically lose half your customers to a modest price increase and still make the same amount of money. By the way, your support costs are now half. You have like half as many customers to service. Your cost of goods, all those things, those all, go down. So the math is wonderful on this. And what we find sometimes is we test a price increase. Often it doesn't impact conversions at all. Sometimes counterintuitively, it increases conversions because now you're premium priced. So this is one of those things that business owners so commonly believe that they can't change their prices, when all we should do from time to time is test out a price change on the front end of that funnel and see how it impacts things. If it impacts it too negatively, you take that down. You can A/B test it and see how it impacts your conversions, right? There are many ways to do things that are very low cost experiments that can provide not just valuable cash flow and profit, but valuable information simply by having a rapid experimentation cycle.
And Dorian, she's talking about she has to change her prices, and
yes,
this is awesome. This is why I love doing this show live, when you get to interaction like that, where people are actually getting value from the episode. So thank you, Dorian, for leaving comments. She also put in, I'm taking notes. This is a masterclass. So you definitely you provided some amazing stuff, Jeremy. This is awesome.
Thank you.
So for someone listening who feels stuck on a plateau, where should they start?
Yeah, so we want to look at in our business, what got us to where we are. Because oftentimes what got us to where we are now won't get us to that next step. Sometimes that's a people thing, right? Like especially in executive leadership, right? Like a CEO who gets you from your 100,000 to $1 million isn't always the same CEO to get you from 1 million to 10 million, 10 to 100, and so forth. Those are usually different skill sets entirely because those are different kinds of companies, right? So sometimes it's a people difference that can that needs a change, right? Oftentimes, however, it's sales channel, business model, and so forth. We may have tapped out an existing pool. So one of the things I talk about in my book is like when we look at where you can niche, right? You may find there's a variation of something you're already doing that you can specialize in a certain niche and then specialize across niches. And now you start to expand the market. The beautiful thing with niching is if you think about yourself needing, hope this never happens, really urgent, important cardiac, heart surgery, right? Do you want to go to the best cardiac specialist for people like you who've done this a million times day in, day out? Or do you want to go to the person who's like a family doctor and veterinarian and a dentist, right? You want the specialist, and that is going to be worth so much more to you. You will pay through the nose for the expert who knows you versus the generalist. So in a business, one of these examples is as you can niche down, especially for newer business owners, it sounds scary because it feels like you're going to be turning away business. But the reality is when you niche down, you can start to speak the language of your prospects and you can attract them and you can repel the ones who aren't going to be good customers for you, right? And there's a lot of value in that. And once you've niched down, you can niche down again in another niche. You can go a sub niche within your niche. There was, I love the world of niching, right? So there was somebody I was working with years ago who he was a financial planner. And so he wanted to do a fun event for his clients and thought like we could do a conference somewhere and bring in a bunch of speakers and teach you all kinds of things. But at the end of the day, people wanted to get together and meet people like them and hang out socially. And sure, they could learn some things, but really they wanted to meet people like them. So they ended up deciding to do a cruise. Now, all of his clients, for the most part, had $1 million net worth and higher, just to be clients of his. And they got together on this cruise and everyone had a great time. And the sessions and speakers, no one was really there for that, but they were valuable. And afterwards, he was getting feedback from his clients about how the event was. And he heard from a number of folks like, hey, this was good. I'm glad you have a bar set for what the minimum net worth is, but like, we want to hang out with people with that $5 million net worth and higher, not these, folks with a $1 million net worth and higher. And he's like, oh, okay. Like there's a sub niche within the niche he's already working in. So he put together an event just for these higher, net worth clients at the 5 million and up, and had that the following year, and had a survey again afterwards, and heard from folks who said like, yeah, like this was great. We enjoyed it. But like, for us folks at the $20 million net worth and higher, it'd be nice to have an event just for us. And he's like, oh, geez, okay, there's a niche within the niche within the niche. And so, he found that the further in he niched and the better he could curate those groups, the much better experience everyone had, the more he could speak to and cater to those needs. These were all clients he was already working with, but within that niche was a niche within a niche within a niche and so forth, right? This also comes up in books. This also comes up in service providers in terms of, the ideal client that they serve. And the more narrowly you can scope that, the far better you can do in business.
Mm. So what does a successful business really look like to you today?
Yeah, so one of the big litmus tests I like to figure out where someone is on their entrepreneurial journey is the question of what would happen if they stepped away from their business for a day or a week, a month, a quarter. Could they go totally offline, like, desert island, no coverage, no Wi-Fi sort of situation? And when they came back, would the business be the same as when they left it? Would it have grown? Or is it a complete dumpster fire? And for many business owners, it's the latter. The idea of stepping away for a day or a weekend or, my gosh, even a week is terrifying to think about what would happen, right? Whereas the true business owners, when I look at what successful business ownership is a business that supports that business owner, that enables them to step away for extended periods of time. Maybe it's welcoming a child into their family, right? As their family grows. Maybe it's that vacation they've always dreamed of taking. Maybe it's that, that offsite intensive they wanted to do, or that focus on launching a new business, whatever it is, right? If you as a business owner are able to step away for periods of time, it doesn't mean you have to, but it means you've put the right people and systems in place that can not just run the business, but can grow the business even in your absence. And that's when I know someone is truly operating and running a real business. And if you're not there yet, that's okay. You're still running a business. You're just somewhere on that entrepreneurial journey from being a solopreneur towards being that true business owner.
Oh, Jeremy, this has been amazing, man. I've loved this interview. This has been dope. But we've come to the part of the show where you get the solo screen and you get to plug away and let everybody know where they can find you, everything.
Love it. Well, thank you for having me on. So my name again is Jeremy Shapiro. I'm the author of Your Business Growth Playbook. And so this is a book you can find at your local bookstores. You can find this online, anywhere that you buy books. And you can also find me and more information about that book at yourbusinessgrowthplaybook.com. You can even get an audio sample of the book, download a piece of the book, get a checklist for, that you can use in your business today. All that and everything else you need is over at yourbusinessgrowthplaybook.com.
Thank you, Jeremy, for being such a great guest, man. I love it especially when a guest gets value and they let it be known. So thank you, Dorian, for sharing the comments. I've greatly appreciated. But don't leave just yet. Let me close out the show and we'll chat a little bit off the air. But Jeremy, man, this was awesome. I appreciate you, man. This was a really good episode, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me on. This is a great show and love the great questions.
Thank you. All right, everybody. Another great show is in the books. I'm so excited. This was so good, man. If this conversation hit home and you're ready to break through your next plateau, take a look at your business growth playbook and connect with Jeremy Shapiro All the links are in the show notes. And if you know an entrepreneur who feels trapped in their own business, share this episode. It might be the wake-up call they need. You know how your boy Wize does it? Peace out.